Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome here this afternoon. Your obvious concern in what direction the wedge is going into. My first speaker, I would like to call on Councillor Bevan O'Regan from the Narrabri Shire. Thank you, Bevan.
Thank you. That sounds a little bit too loud. Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again. Yes, I'm a Shire Councillor, Narrabri Shire Councillor. I'm very pleased to come across here to introduce Mr. George Turner. I'm a father of 3 sons. I live at Narrabri, and I have been unfortunately, failing for nearly 40 years. About 3 years ago, I suppose I became very interested in this Constitution. It happens to be our Commonwealth Constitution, a very, very important document. It is the most important document that we have. And I was researching a little bit as to why the Commonwealth should be able to go down to Tasmania and overrule that state and stop them building a dam. And I became more interested in each of the 128 segments of it, the Constitution or the parts thereof. But I came across a man going the other way, researching Section 44. Section 44 says very simply, and it is a very simple thing, that if you have allegiance to any other country, you can't hold an office in Canberra or any political party, any political persuasion. Now, that is very simple, but the Herald, if you regard the Herald as a very worthwhile paper and a true documentation, the Herald this year in March said there could be, due to the Australia Act of 1986, there could be at least half the parliamentarians sitting there in contravention of this Section 44. Now, George has challenged the Governor-General, every politician. He's even written to the Queen. He's found out that that letter to the Queen went back to the Governor-General. He's challenged them to challenge him in Parliament, because if they challenge him, of course, it will be their cost, of course. George doesn't want to take up the cost. But since he has offered this challenge, no one has actually taken up his challenge. Now, I think that says a lot. He is a non-practicing lawyer, which means if you're a non-practicing lawyer, you don't earn a lot of money. I'm not sure just how George gets by, but he lives in Sydney. He is a councillor. I missed this the other night. We had a meeting in Narrabri the other night. I didn't tell everyone that he was a councillor on the Strathfield Council. I thought that might have been a minus actually, but he's a councillor on the Strathfield Council. He has a charming wife and in Sydney with 7 children. I don't know how he finds the time, because he seems to always be away, but anyway, he has a charming wife with 7 children. And he's said to me many times that if we can't fix this problem of what's wrong with Australia, there is not much future for my kids, your kids, or his kids. And that's the sort of person that George is. He's involved with a man that I have a lot of time for, Dr. David Mitchell, who is probably one of the best international constitutional lawyers in Australia. He really is a fantastic man, Dr. David Mitchell. And he also said if we have to beat this party system, we have to fight. And it is the party system that I'm afraid we are still at. We are still at the constraints of this party system that really destroys us. This meeting has been organised virtually. I'm not too sure what it's organised for. I know that I have to introduce George. Mr. Gambrews has organised it. But we see Australia in the farming community further where we are as basically on its knees, because anyone in wool is in trouble, anyone in wheat is in trouble. We are in the 2nd year of deregulation, and wheat has come back up at 40% in price. We virtually are not told the truth, but the facts are that this is the richest nation in the world per capita. No one will argue on that, and yet we are actually going down. It is my very great pleasure to introduce George Turner, because George is I believe, a Christian man, but apart from that, he knows the truth, he speaks the truth, and he's a very learned gentleman. Ladies and gentlemen, I will give you Mr. George Turner.
Well, what I intend doing first is to address the issue which, first of all, motivated Gan. I think they can hear fairly clearly. Is there anyone who can't hear me? No, it seems fine. We don't want to make it too loud, Gan. My voice is bad enough. I think what we'll do is first of all talk about what Gan has asked me to come about, and that is how Lightning Ridge can lawfully go about establishing its own council. Now, I am led to believe that that is the wish of the overwhelming majority of the people in the area, and that it's basically on the grounds that in an area like this, where you are a mining town predominantly, but admittedly you have a very strong tourist element, that it's always desirable that you be as autonomous as you can, with the least amount of interference or control from governments removed, no matter whether it's 60 kilometres, 100 kilometres, 600 miles, or whatever. Now, looking at the question, I do understand that some years ago there was an attempt made along these lines, and that most of the people of Lightning Ridge showed that they did want this to occur. And that is one of the reasons why I accepted this invitation. Because having formed that view that it's not just the wish of a few, but quite a large number, then in a democracy, we all have the right to express our views as what we think is best for our community. Having said that, the method of achieving what you want is relatively legally simple. However, the politics can be quite complicated. I will tell you very briefly what the legal rules are. The Governor of the state has the power, by proclamation, to define an area, including the town of Lightning Ridge, and to declare it a separate shire or municipality. Now, for him to do that, however, it is not something that he can do of his own accord. First of all, what is necessary is that if you have sufficiently enough people from your area who want it, then you will form a group and establish a petition to send not to the government directly, but to the Minister for Local Government. Now, of course, it goes without saying that the more people of the town who want a separate council, for whatever reason, and I certainly do not intend at any time today going into those issues, because I believe it would be wrong of me to do so, first of all being an outsider, and secondly, that all the different stories one hears, one is not sure of where the real truth may lie. And certainly in my position as a lawyer, and speaking at a meeting here as a guest, I do not wish to be involved in that. Mind you, the air up here is not as high as Alice Springs, where I spoke not long ago. But mind you, it's drier than Sydney. Moving on now, I've pointed out how the Governor has the power by proclamation to do it. But first of all, you have to have the petition to the Minister for Local Government. Now, on my reading of the Local Government Act, he can't merely dismiss it out of hand. There must be some sort of a process that he uses to look at the merits of the case that is being put up. And I give you this reassurance right now that should the majority wish of this meeting be to establish, or at least seek to establish, your own Shire Council, I will give the organisers as much help as I can. And in that regard, if that is your wish, then you had better pray that a miracle occurs and I sell my place in Sydney and move to Ballatta, which is an ideal place for my 7 young children. And of course, it's a lot closer to here. Having said that, as I said, the Minister for Local Government has the power to make a decision on receipt of the petition. Now, he does an exercise. If he decides that there is merit in the proposal, he then advertises it. Now, as a result of that advertisement, people who are of the other view, in other words, those who are opposed, have the right to put their case. And they can do it in the same process. If after that process the Minister is still of the view that a Shire Council should be formed, and one would think that he would have a very hard task of thinking otherwise, particularly if you had a percentage, say, between 80 to 90% at least of your population wishing to have a separate Shire for Lightning Ridge, that it would be quite a difficult task for him to deny it. If, assuming that he is then of the view that yes, there is merit still in the proposal, he then has to refer it to the Boundaries Commission for their inquiry. Now, don't those of you who are in favour of the idea get disheartened by this. These procedures are put here in the law to protect your interests and those interests of those who are opposed to you. If, however, as a result of that exercise in the Boundaries Commission, and I can assure you that their inquiries are done on this kind of matter in a very impartial way, if as a result of that they too support the proposal, then it is referred to the Governor for the purposes of issuing the proclamation. Now, of course, at that stage, there's a lot of work that has gone through working out what assets, etc., of the existing Shire that you're actually being taken away from will be applied to the people of Lightning Ridge, because after all, your rates have supported that particular Shire for many years, and of course, some of that property, if there is a division, would come across to you. But all of that takes time, but is a process run by the Department of Local Government and by experts. So in other words, those of you who are of the view that it is desirable to at least make the attempt to go down right along the course to seeking to have it done, I would recommend that it be done, because any area is certainly deserving of its own autonomy. And I intend mentioning something very briefly that Councillor Bevan O'Regan will dwell on a little longer later on. But most of you would not be aware that there is a procedure being developed now in local government. And interestingly enough, it doesn't affect us so much in the city yet. But certainly out in these country areas, it's already established in a big way. It's what's called regionalisation. Now, I understand that this area is part of Narok. Am I correct, Bevan? Now, this is a regional organisation which, in effect, has a connection directly through to the federal government. Now, you might all remember back in 1988, the federal government put to you a referendum question involving local government and the federal government wanting power over federal government. Most local shires and councils supported the yes vote to that question. I will be quite honest with you and say that I was very strongly opposed. What people do not realise is that there is already an ongoing process to achieve the very result that the people said no to at the referendum. Hence, you need to know this particular aspect in relation to your desire to set up your own Shire Council here. Because at the moment, you are answerable first to Walgett, then through to the state government. If in fact you set up your own council, it becomes you to the state government. If the end result of this regionalisation is that the state government loses more and more of its powers, and that is the real object of the exercise, if the state government loses more and more of its exercise, you will lose more of your autonomy the more removed you are, or the more links there are in the system. So in other words, if you, as you are at the moment, first go through Walgett, and then at the end of this regionalisation exercise, there's a line to Canberra, you have actually got a, I won't call it an impediment, but you've got an extra link in the chain that may not be good for the people of Lightning Ridge. And believe me, the more I have seen of local council or of any level of government, the more that the ultimate body that determines policy affecting your lives, the more it is removed from you, the people, the more you are controlled and have very little chance of input. Hence, you've got a very strong argument that at least if this regionalisation exercise is going to have this effect of increased Commonwealth power, and I will talk more about that later on, but I'll just give you an idea of what is developing. There is an IULA declaration at the moment. Now that is a declaration in the international sphere. Because of what has happened in our country since 1982, all of these international treaties and conventions that are being entered into have a direct effect on every one of you and your lives here in Australia. After I have finished this brief talk on how to go about setting up your council legally, there will be a short break for questions on this subject, and then I will be giving you a bit of a rundown on what has happened to your country and what's really happening. But this is why I mention at the moment there is this IULA declaration. It does not yet have the effect of law for local government, but there are moves afoot currently being done by the federal government and other councils to bring about an international agreement involving local councils. Now this declaration that currently is in existence, I can only describe as a straight Marxist document, because amongst other things, it is based on the principle of lopping top puppies by way of particularly getting them to support other councils that aren't as well off, etc., etc. Now, of course, that is straight Marxism. However, more of that for the talk which is to come. So coming back to this proposal, it is one which, from my point of view, if I were in Lightning Ridge, I would certainly be asking myself the question, do we want more autonomy for ourselves as the people of Lightning Ridge to be able to determine our own local government matters in as much as we can, given that there is already substantial state government and federal government interference? But it certainly is, from my point of view, if I were here, worth a try. Some of you might be of an opposing view, and that is certainly all right. And that is why I now, having covered the legalities and shown that yes, it can be done, and it is quite a simple legal process, but one that might be more difficult politically speaking, I'll just throw it open for, anybody who might want to ask a question.
I would assume, naturally enough, if there was a referendum to take place for some matter to be sent down to Canberra, it would only be looked at by people who are registered people at Lightning Ridge. We're getting back to the problem we've always had here at Lightning Ridge, in that there's a lot of people who are not legally on the roll of like the rich. So anything like that would only be looked at that field.
Yes, I'm very glad you asked that question. The actual legality is that it must be, and I'll read to you the actual clause, and it's quite clear. It says, in the case where a part of an area is proposed to be separated from one and attached to another area, or is proposed to be created a separate area, and that is the one in your case, a separate area, by not less, and this is the petition, by not less than 250 electors of that part, or where that part has fewer than 2,500 electors, by not less than 1/10 of the electors of that part. So in other words, we're not talking about a petition from everybody who might suddenly come literally out of the woodwork or the mine works to put their name on a petition. But the ones on the petition have to be registered electors on the roll. So it won't be a case of you, those of you who might be opposed to the idea, it won't be a case of you being railroaded by people who aren't even on the electoral roll.
Mr. Turner, this being a world of realities, and having a look at the financial side of it, and considering that Lightning Ridge, unofficially, and no one would argue with me, has 20% of the population, they are only paying 4% of the rates in Walgett, and they've got 33% of the councillors. Just basically, and they're figures that can't be denied, wouldn't you say they're a fairly good thing?
Actually, as an alternative, I would say that Walgett Shire Council's on a very good thing given those figures. Hence, I would see a very strong argument for them supporting Lightning Ridge forming its own council and stop being a drain on their own money.
Mr. Turner, again, we're in a world of reality. Let's face facts. When they're on their own, and they've got to make up that shortfall between 4 and 20%, and their rates go up 400%, would you think they would think they're on such a good thing now? Maybe Walgett Shire Council's quite happy to be rid of it, but unfortunately it'll never happen. I got $1,000 to bet any day of the week.
Well, given the figures that you've quoted, you may have a point there, and that would perhaps certainly be, if they could be substantiated, and I'm not saying for a moment they can't be, a valid ground for objection to be lodged with the Minister for Local Government. But I also live in a world of reality, and that world of reality tells me that when the Treasurer of this country, and I'm not being political, but when the Treasurer of this country and the Prime Minister tell us blandly that we are not in a recession, and I know that we are, then I am not so sure about any particular set of figures that can be quoted for any purpose. What really concerns me is the initiative of an area to make a particular proposal work. Now you can bet, and I'll put up $1,000 and bet, that if the people of Lightning Ridge really wanted their own autonomy enough, they would be prepared in the short run to maybe spend a bit more to get it up and working, and then...
The figures the gentleman's quoting relate to beddings by Walgett Shire Council on people who have property here. I mean, an autonomous area or council here might not have the same levies. I mean, they might not do the same work in the town initially, until all those people who want the autonomous council here are in and voting and paying rates or camp fees or whatever. So those figures are not real. you can't really say that that would be in the case of the future.
Yes, I appreciate that, and that is one of the things that would come out in the process commenced by the Minister for Local Government and further on by the Boundaries Commission. These are the kind of things which would be looked at during that process. And so, the truth or the reality, wherever it finally lies, and talking economists and all of that, I've heard 3 economists talk and none of them have ever agreed. It's the same as 3 lawyers. You can never get 3 lawyers to agree on those things. So during the process, and that's a completely independent inquiry, one would think that all of these facts would then come out into the open and be completely impartially assessed. And I've already given you my guarantee that if you do agree to go along with this proposal, and even if I'm still in Sydney, but it looks pretty certain that I will be out at Ballarat at least, or somewhere fairly close in the country, I will continue the input and advice needed to maintain your approach to the state government on a purely professional and balanced basis.
Mr. Turner, the one point I'd like to make to you, and I agree with you about us being in a recession. There's no argument about that whatsoever. And I also agree that you can get economists to do anything because figures don't lie, but liars can figure. That's true too. But I repeat and I repeat again, there's not one man in this room, when it comes down to reality, he'll pay 4 times the rates he's paying now for the same services he's getting.
What service are we getting, Mr. President?
Yes.
Mr. Turner.
You're on council long enough to learn, but you didn't. You quit. You couldn't go to heat.
Mr. Turner.
You're going to tell me why.
Thank you again.
Sorry.
Courtesy, if you don't mind. Mr. Turner, we've heard from Mr. O'Regan what a fine man you are. Your problems with the Constitution. I understand, but you tell the people once again here, in plain, clear English, what is your problem with the Constitution? I ask this because you've offered your services to come here, help the people of Lightning Ridge 3 times in the last 35 minutes. I understand, is it not a problem with the Constitution? You don't like people with joint nationality? Is that the situation? People in Parliament, is that what you object to? I'm asking you, sir, is that what you object to?
I was giving you the courtesy of letting you finish the question.
Well, I haven't finished yet, sir. Well, I'm waiting for your reply to that. I'm waiting for your reply to that.
No, it's not me that objects to it at all. It's the Australian Constitution.
The Australian Constitution.
Oh, I thought you said there was going to be more in the question.
There will be in a moment, sir. Thank you very much for your accomplished talking.
Can I ask a question? Why do we want a separate shire? What's the idea for it? Why do we want a separate shire? What's the point of it?
Well, you know, I thought I'd made the point clear. I don't really intend going into the arguments for or against.
So what problems do we have with the present shire?
The issue I was
The
asked,
problem is going to be to find out that we need another shire.
well, I was asked to come here to talk, first of all, specifically on the lawful process that the people of Lightning Ridge could use to achieve a separate shire. That I have done. I said I think it would be improper for me to go down and become involved in the local areas of dispute, and I think any person in the room would have to agree with my integrity for doing just that. Because A, I don't have sufficient local knowledge, and B, one never really knows where the truth ultimately lies. And actually, having said that, that is the kind of thing that if the majority of the people of Lightning Ridge put up a proposal to the state government, all of these issues are then looked at an impartial level, hopefully.
Mr. Turner, I have a question, and it relates to the gentleman here who was talking about higher rates. I've been in Lightning Ridge for 12 months, and as yet have not put myself on the electoral roll, and I'll be doing that first thing Monday morning. But the point I'd like to make is I lived in the Sydney area for a long time as a single person and could not support myself sufficiently I do not see how paying a little extra in this wonderful town that has helped me grow so much could be any worse than going back to a place like Sydney where you just cannot afford to live. You cannot afford to. I would be quite happy to pay rates for services rendered by the Lightning Ridge Shire Council.
Mr. Turner, I've been, for it's worth, living here for 21 years full time. And it's been my opinion over the years that the services we receive from Aldgate Shire Council fluctuate from year to year, subject to A, the amount of money available to Aldgate Shire Council to look after all parts of the Shire, and B, subject to the number of councillors we have on Aldgate Shire Council to speak on our behalf. But in very, very many cases, it's also been a matter of the individual Shire clerk at Aldgate Shire Council having an influence. He's either for Lightning Ridge or dead set against Lightning Ridge. We shan't mention any names of Shire clerks in there. But they are individual situations that change continuously. A lot of it is subject to the amounts of money available to Aldgate Shire Council in forms of rates and grants, so that they can share the monies around evenly at Lightning Ridge, Colorin and by the other places. I would need to, as a long-term resident here and as having had no complaints with Aldgate Shire Council myself, I'd need to actually hear some really good reasons why we, this part of Aldgate Shire Council, would actually need to separate, where right now we know what we've got. In future, we may have very little, if not bugger all, under our own what's name. We then, like the complaints I hear, I couldn't find the building inspector who was supposed to be sitting outside the front door. Well, even if we've got our own Shire Council and our own building inspector, we still mightn't be able to find the bugger. So each complaint and each situation is changeable, and it's, of course, can be overcome specifically. I would, on the other hand, also be totally horrified if it takes 10% of the number of people on the electoral roll, and I understand it's about 1,700 here, that 170 people could take it upon themselves to fill out a petition sincerely and seriously, and then without a proper referendum and without a proper discussion to give us the ability to make our own decisions, for them to just go ahead and sign a petition and go for it. I'd like to hear about it.
That's a good... Actually, there are two substantive issues in that question. I'll deal with the last bit first. Namely, your concern that 170 signatures without a referendum or plebiscite or whatever you want to call it could have this effect for the whole of Lightning Ridge. The reality of that is that I do not think that that would be the position. As I understand, last time that this was done, a vast or overwhelming majority of the people of Lightning Ridge... Anyway, I'll continue on what I've been told. I still understand that a large majority, or vast majority, wanted the exercise done. And petitions were accordingly signed by far more than the minimum requirement. 820, that's the figure I've just been given. So you locals know the truth of whether that's so or not. 820 signatures. So given that same type of figure now, you can see that it's not just the people being bound by what would be branded as a small ragtag minority. If you have a figure like that now from 1,700, well, that's getting pretty close to half, or over half. You may find a lot more. Now, during that process of taking signatures, people have got the ability to make up their own minds whether they'll sign the petition or not. Now, for those who choose not to sign the petition, the ones that you are concerned about that are going to lose whatever rights they are, don't think that, because I thought I'd made that clear. That is not so. Because the first thing that happens when the minister receives the petition and makes up his mind that, well, yes, there is some merit, he then has to advertise the proposals under the Local Government Act, seeking objections to the proposal. So then those who object, and it's exactly the same procedure then under the Act, they then get petitions together and get whoever wishes to sign the petition of objection. Now, once that is all done, the minister then looks at the situation and makes up his mind, well, whether on balance it still proceeds. If he does, then the next step is boundaries commission. We're looking particularly at the geographical boundary and what it's going to be. And again, that process involves submissions from those who advocate that certain areas belong in, and submissions from those who object, presumably from those areas that are particularly going to be on the defined border between Walgett Shire and, if it goes ahead, Lightning Ridge Shire. But again, I don't want to go into the local issues. That's the legal side of things. Now, there was one other thing that you mentioned and made an issue of, and that was the grants monies as being part of the income of council. Now, whilst I do not wish to influence anybody's views one way or the other, I am sufficiently recognise the fact that Lightning Ridge is a unique town in the sense that you have a tourist industry here that is virtually, apart from, I think it's Cooper Beatty in South Australia, is virtually unique to Australia. And certainly some of those magnificent black opals that you have are certainly unique virtually in the world. Having said that, you have got a major tourist element present in this town that is not existent in, say, other parts of the Shire. I don't recall that in, say, Walgett itself or surrounding Walgett that you have open lines or the like. Having said that, we have, particularly if one can accept the talk from the federal government, that there is a major government initiative on the development of tourism. Now you might think, well, what the heck has all this got to do with grants? One of the things that happens with the federal government in terms of grants, money, and also our state government, particularly through their tourists or tourism developments, if they think that an area is going to be more successful in terms of tourism, then money has a habit of flowing in. So in terms of grants, don't overlook the fact that here in Lightning Ridge, you have got a trump card that if I was here in Lightning Ridge, I would strongly argue for, that you've got a tourist element that is not present in other parts and should therefore be used as an argument to increase your grant funds.
Very well put, Mr. Turner. What I'd like to say is that at the very present time, the Walgett Shire Council, in their submissions, we've had some very good clerks. They've put the point of that we've got all these tourists coming to Lightning Ridge. We've also put the point that there's about 6,000 people here that are not on the road. And all those things, as you say, are factors. They're factors that are built in to the grants that we get. The Aborigines in Walgett that are not on the road, the miners that are here are not on the road. The very big factor is that to date, it's having no significant effect on the amount of grants we're getting. And if tourism attracts so much, why didn't the federal government build us an all-weather aerodrome here that had the backing of the Walgett Shire Council and your local Chamber of Commerce?
Well, if I had been here, I too would have supported that completely. I can't answer for the federal government because I spend almost 99% of my time fighting them.
Mr. Turner, I think this whole meeting has been brought about by a pressing fact that's been on everybody's mind at the moment, and that is the fact that we have a lot of people who live out on camps at Lightning Ridge, right? And one of the problems that we have at the moment is that we're giving no surety at all, whether it's from federal or local government, that our existence is in any way guaranteed at this particular time. And I think that we've been looking at virtually other alternatives because of this matter. And I'd like to put it to probably some of the councillors here now. A, is our lifestyle going to be threatened the way that it is? And B, I would have a solution to it if it is in fact threatened. And I think that that is. Everybody who lives in Lightning Ridge out in the camps, we don't want to get anything for nothing, right? We don't mind paying for any services we get. We live out on the camps. A lot of us are mining on that area, and some of us are not mining on that area, mining in other areas, but they have their house there. And I personally myself, I live out on the field, and I wouldn't mind paying some sort of money to buy the land that I'm on. And I think people who live out on the 9 Mile wouldn't mind paying some money to buy the land that they're on. Give them some sort of security that they're not going to be continually threatened by this talk of being kicked out of the field. Now, I would suggest that you could virtually draw 3 circles around Lightning Ridge. You've got the town area, then you've got an outer area of about 2, maybe 3 kilometres, whatever it is, and say, right, anybody who lives on a 50 by 50 metre claim, if they're mining elsewhere and they're living on that claim, that land will come up for sale to them at a nominal cost, $1,000, $1,500 or something like that, because you then do enjoy the facilities of being close to town. I accept that. Anybody who lives 6 kilometres out, maybe that land comes up for sale to them for $1,000, and anybody who lives over the shipyard, it would be a little bit less. I think it's a very, very simple solution. We've got a town here at Lightning Ridge where I'm involved in the tourist industry as well, and I know the benefit of bringing a lot of overseas people to Lightning Ridge, and they see our lifestyle, and it's putting a lot of dollars into Lightning Ridge, and if that lifestyle was threatened, I think Lightning Ridge would feel the pinch. And I think also, if we can't get any sort of satisfaction from the council, they can assure us that our lifestyle is not going to be threatened, I think we could probably look at some other alternatives of governing our own destiny.
As I said, I did not intend becoming involved in the local issues. My only comment, and I'm horrified as a lawyer to hear, that there appears on what you've said, if it is correct, that there is not security of tenure. I find that a dreadful proposition. Now, it's probably not just going to be solved by having your own local shire, but if in fact there was an element that if by getting your own local shire you would have a stronger voice to protect security of tenure, well, go for it.
That's the very reason we're doing it.
Can I suggest to you people that seem to be about a week behind the times, read the next flash? If you can believe it.
You've got a crystal ball, have you?
Walgett Shire Council are not only now, have been for the last 12 months, hard right solely behind people getting some type of title to the area that they're living in the area the council's got control over, and that's the ex-Lawn country. We can't go out and tell the Graziers what to do, any more than you can build a house in Hyde Park and demand tenure over it.
Just tell me reason. What's the reason that you're threatening us with the Walgett Shire Council?
We have not threatened you in any shape before, but
Yes, with the rights, with everything else. Why we never get our son if he live here? Tell me just one.
It's hopeless, mate. Look, I'll debate anybody on this issue. I'll read out what the initiatives the Walgett Shire Council have taken, and they've been many, varied, and great. You're getting the great crack of the whip, and you haven't got enough brains to see it. And that's the one lady that wanted to pay a little bit more. I asked you was 400% at the very least, a little bit more. Can I give you a few figures? I'll give you a couple of figures.
Nobody accepts positive brain.
There'll never be more tax, not
I'd say
there.
anybody that wants to pay
Order, ladies and gentlemen, please. Order.
I'd say anybody that wants to pay
Mr. President, please.
anyone that wants to pay 400% at the very least more in
We
wage
won't
for the
have
same
to.
service.
That's all we
Please, ladies and gentlemen.
How much is the land at Lawn?
Too much.
And who gets the money for it? The council?
No,
No.
no, it'll be at least on the state government if we get our
And
way.
we get title for that if we buy it.
No, if you'll get a lease to it, and that's the best title that we can get to. We've been in Adelaide
It's
for
no
3
good
years trying to
if
get
we
something.
can't mine on it, is it? Can we mine on it?
George, can I make a suggestion? Can I? I'd like to make a suggestion that with the Lightning Ridge Shire Council, we could purchase the overbearing ridges of the Western lands and then govern the people ourselves. Give the people title over the Kent. To me it's very simple. To me there's no argument with it. And the meetings of Lightning Ridge Shire Council will be open. Try and go into the Walrus Shire and get a hearing. They are closed doors. Why? I thought it was democracy. Right, George, I go.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce, your last statement. A lot of you people are new to Lightning Ridge. A lot of you people are new. I guess you are. We know a lot of you and a lot of you new. Our last speaker, who says the doors are always closed, do you know once upon a time he was a Shire councillor? Yes, he was elected. He was elected. He went round with these little stories like he's doing now. He told everybody these great things how he's going to lead us into this land of prosperity. Didn't he?
Your garbage won't make any difference.
Would you mind taking your mouth shut, mate?
Then speak about the meeting.
Now, why don't you get a manager and stop handling yourself?
Stop speaking about personal attacks.
I'm just talking to this gentleman who's talking about the great things he did. I'm saying to you, sir, you lasted there after we put our faith in you. You lasted there for 1 year. Then you walked away. You took your bat and your ball and your stumps and you went home.
You want me to tell the people the reason why I stood down?
Tell us the reason.
Councillor Peters hit me with 2 allegations of defamation. I was very green, I admit, and took it with nothing. I admit that, but today would be a different story.
Well, today now you're more mature. So if somebody disputes something you're saying,
I admit that.
when you start off this charade that you're trying to start off with, if somebody doesn't upset you, you won't take your bat home. You won't take your ball home. You won't take your bat home.
Lolly out your mouth.
Slim, I am very glad to say I'm a little bit more mature than you now.
Mr. Turner, my name's John Doyle. I'm an intermittent resident here since before 1980. 4 years ago, took me 3 months to do so, and half a dozen mud maps. Now, my name is on the electoral roll at Rouse's 6 Mile, on my claim 13103. I now vote here at all elections on that. My driver's licence states D. Doyle, Rouse's 6 Mile, mining. Now, there was nothing apparently to stop a lot of other people doing exactly the same thing. And at the time I did that, we only had 600, I think I was 602nd or something. We now have some more people in town. We don't have very many people. But if I could do that 4 years ago, on the mining claim, at Rouse's 6 Mile, I don't see why all the other people are whinging. Just simple fill form in.
Well,
Then you'll have your voting numbers.
Well, that's obviously a local practice that I'm unaware of and actually goes beyond the charter of what I've been asked to speak on anyway. But if that is a fact, then obviously many here might want to follow it.
Well, let's take a vote on it. It's about time we all get on that date, isn't it?
Thanks, George. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's dragging on. I'd like to put a motion here that we have drawn up. That motion simply reads that this meeting of the people of Lightning Ridge urges the executive of the Lightning Ridge Small Miners Federation to take all necessary action to prepare and present to the State Government of New South Wales the appropriate petition for presentation to the Governor of New South Wales seeking the establishment of the Shire of Lightning Ridge incorporating the areas of all open bearing country. Do I have a mover for that motion, please? Do I have a seconder for that motion, please? Is there any, well, we've had enough debate about a Lightning Ridge Shire. All those in favour of a Lightning Ridge Shire? Sorry, I've been rectified.
I've got an amendment, Mr. Chairman. I want you to add the
Sorry, Mr. Bennett, hang
I
on.
want you to add the words, and I'll move the amendment, irrespective of the cost.
You will lose the job.
That's my amendment. Can I get a second?
Is there any debate against that motion?
You don't tell me you're not going to take my amendment. It's been seconded.
Is there any debate against the motion?
I've been given the microphone. I prefer not to be involved in this role because it's really technically done as the chairman. So I'm just going to say aloud over the microphone what I'm saying to the chairman, is that you have now an amendment which has been seconded before the chair as well. You must have debate on the amendment now that has been done. So the chairman should really ask, is there a speaker in favour of the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I'm certainly speaking in favour of the amendment because I've got 2 feet on the ground. I live in a world of reality. Friday night, I had a lady ring me up from Lightning Ridge, a lady that lives in a camp that's very, very concerned. And she congratulated me on how I put and how the other Lightning Ridge councillors followed the steps we're trying to get people some form of security in Lightning Ridge. Now, Councillor Paul Chapman sitting down there, he voted unanimously with the motion at Walgett Shire Council to try and get these steps. But they're not something we've started lately. They're something that we started some 10 years ago, around about the time you gave up. And what I'd like to say very much, Mr. Chairman, we've run our heads into lots of brick walls, but we're in there still trying. Now, I think it would be a lovely little thing to have our own little Lightning Ridge Council. But when I say it's irrespective of the cost, I know the cost. I can tell you what you'd get if you were going to run a council. What you would get in rates are $80,000, I checked in the rate book. You would get about 10% of the untied grant. The untied grant's about $1 million. So you would pick up another 100,000. That's 180,000. Out of that you'd have to pay a grade 1 clerk, 40 grand. Then you'd have to pay his superannuation. Then you'd have to pay his long service leave and his contribution to workers' comp. You'd be up for about 50 grand for him. The local government act says you must have a clerk. It doesn't say you have to have a full-time engineer. It doesn't say that you have to have a full-time health surveyor. But that bloke that comes here once a week from Walgett, get a part-time one, he'll be here once a month. That's if A, you can find a part-time one. Now, you can get a bloke to do the job if he's got both certificates. That's permissible. But who, in his right mind, would have both certificates if he was a grade 1? He'd be a pretty smart man and he wouldn't want to be coming to Lightning Ridge. Again, he'd cost you about 60 grand. So now you've lost 60 and 60, 120 out of the meagre amount you're going to be able to collect. After that, you've got to pay the Walgett Shire Council back for the existing loans that are out on the township of Lightning Ridge. You've got to buy graders.
Mr. Prentice,
You've got to pay 3 blokes.
Mr. Prentice,
I'm reading the amendment. I've got an entitlement to stand there alongside you. Pity you didn't learn so much on council. You learned nothing much about debate. But anyway, Mr. Chairman, what I'm trying to say is that you're going to be up for about 500 grand. So I'd love to have a little council here in Lightning Ridge. Nothing should be better. There's no one in the wide world. When I'm getting the job done now from Walgett, who are subsidising us, that I'm going to keep the rates that I collect from 80 grand a year to 400 grand a year, and that's what would amount to. So I say, nobody in this room here would go into it with their eyes open, I don't believe, and automatically pay 400. The lady is that she pay a little bit more. Even in Paul Keating's terms, 400% is a bit more than a little bit more. Now, what I want to say to you is, if you go into this, go into it with your eyes open. And a while ago, a false statement was made, there's roughly 7,000 people here. It was made that 850 people, and a lot of those people signed that petition twice and 3 times, irrespective of what pub they were drinking in when it was brought round.
There.
850 out of 7,000 is no vast majority.
Hang on.
My amendment is, are you going to go into it, irrespective of cost?
Not on your terms, no. Not on your terms.
They're not my terms.
Sir.
They're the terms of the Minister for Local Government.
Sir.
What I'm saying is, I'll go along with you if you go along irrespective of cost, but if you won't go along irrespective of cost, I'm going to go home because I'm not that silly.
That's good. Thank you, sir. We have about, when I was at council in 1984, we had 600 ratepayers. Now, my rates across the street there today are $900 for one block.
Not basic rate. That's
The total amount is $900. The total amount. Multiply, the average I understand is around $600 in Lightning Ridge. Multiply that by around, if there are 600 guys in there in 84, we'd have around 700 or 800 today. So multiply that 600 by around the 700 or 800. Then we have the registered claims. That is another inducement from government grants to Lightning Ridge. Is there another speaker please against the motion?
I'd like to
I'd like to
speak.
make a statement, Mr Chairman. I'd like to ask a question first. Apparently there's a lot of interest here today in what the proposed new council could do for the camp holders in Lightning Ridge. Now, at the moment we haven't made a report about that, but there's a very important report coming out in the very near future as to the progress we've made. But I would like to ask the solicitor, if the new council does come into effect, can the new council give the camp holders security of tenure? Under what form can they give it?
After what?
I must realise that I'm now in an area that I am unfamiliar with, namely these, what are they called, camp claims? You see, I involve myself in certain areas, but this is one area that, having not been involved in mining, I'm not aware of. However, it does seem to me quite logical that if you do have your own strong local autonomous council acting squarely on behalf of your own interests, you have a very strong advocate body to try and have whatever changes are necessary made to the law to protect the security of tenure. And I am quite happy that if Walgett Shire Council, it appears that they at the moment are genuinely acting on behalf of you in that regard, I'm quite happy if they want to ring me to give me a bit of a rundown on what it's involved, and I'll put my brain to helping them to give them a bit of a clue as to which way to go.
Well, just the information of the meeting, we met, the local committee met the council last Monday in Walgett, and we got complete satisfaction. That's the committee. I'm not in a position to make a report here today. The report will be made later time at the last meeting of the persons concerned. But you can accept the fact that the Walgett Shire gave us every support that was necessary for us to progress our program.
Thank you, Wally.
Mr Chairman, we are actually speaking on Mr Prentice's amendment, which says irrespective of cost. I'd like to speak against that. I mean, it seems to me that no one, including Mr Chairman here, has actually done the paperwork and has actually looked at how much it would cost to do all what we are proposing to do by signing a petition, by approaching government, the local minister for government. We haven't actually done the basic footwork, Gan, have we? Why don't we form a committee, do the footwork, look at that, and then talk again? By that stage, you will be able to explain to long-term residents like ourselves here in this room just what's in it for us, what's going to cost us, what do we have to do. But right now, that thing's premature. I'd like to speak against the amendment.
Personally, Herman, thank you. Personally, I would sooner take the risk and form our own council, regardless of the cost. That's how confident I am. Is there any speakers in favour of the amendment?
Did we have any risk to lose our, like camps and things like that?
Not under the which council they wouldn't know.
Yeah, well, but if we are with the Walgett, I haven't got nothing against really Shire Walgett Council. I reckon it's okay. So far, I get a problem before but I see everything rising up, so my rights rising too. But what worry me, I all the time hearing new rules for the clients, new rules for the camps, new rules for the more Shire Walgett Council take more land there and there. What will be with us? One day it will be all probably in the Shire Council. So what we got to do? We losing a little bit on the rights and things. But what will be with the rest of the land and things like that? We got to be lost all.
My idea of the Lightning Ridge Shire Council, we approach the Commissioner of Western Lands, we buy the ridges off the Commissioner, and then allow the camp owners to buy their camps individually.
Isn't that the question that the lady was trying to ask? What cost do you envisage totally to start the project?
It doesn't matter.
Well, let me talk to you, please. Thank you. We like the idea of the Ridge having its own council, but we, as the gentleman just said, we don't really know what cost. Where does the money come from? We know we get a portion from Walgett because they will be losing a portion from their shire. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right? And you already have ratepayers in town, and I hope very soon in the near future to be one of those people, but at the moment I'm out on the claim. So what cost, where is the money coming from to put together a council, and I did vote for the amendment, for a council to be supportive without taking it out of too many people's pockets and not enough out of somebody else's. So there must be some sort of idea of where money comes from. I guess you get some from the government. But can't we have some figures? I mean, can't we have, this is what the lady was saying.
We've been paying Shire rates to the Walgett Council for approximately 30 years. Now surely over that period of time, we would deserve our own fair share of all the equipment, whatever they have in that office. Is that right, George?
Well, there is an apportionment process here.
It will be up to the people what you would want to start off with. What do we need? What do we get at the present moment from the Walgett Shire?
Why don't you know?
Can I say something? I mean, I come there a few years back and I come down from the coast. In 1958, when I come down the coast in Wollongong as an immigrant, and next thing, that time was very difficult, like to build a house, inflation, and not an opportunity like that. So I decided my own decision to build a garage in my local land. The council decided if not build a local land. Anyway, I went back to court. So I got fined 21 guineas. Now, it wasn't long ago I went back to Wollongong Council and said why I was in the court that time, fined 21 guineas. And today they advertise that anybody can fix up his own garage in the back of accommodation, reasonable accommodation, they can put people to live. Now that is New South Wales law, and that's happened to me. In back in Wollongong, because anyone can build a garage in the back of his property and live there. Now why we can't build it here? Now if we can get people here, build, I mean, how we can afford by $20,000 to shoot down $20,000 we can't. But we can get people just coming there to start. Exactly. But a lot of pensions coming here with a little money to try to, because it's health and this. And the council is very important. What council we can have in town. And the council makes the rules. Follow the states. What the states do. Now, to build one accommodation, I've been working for the government, Housing Commission, one accommodation, one divorce. Now, and she was pregnant, all right? They have one child. Now, the government went there and spent $130,000 to give one person and a child, and she was pregnant. $130,000 to build a townhouse for her, because that's our law. So she didn't know if it was a male or female, so they got to prepare all that. Now we got to think about to give to somebody even here. He's coming with a little money. Start. See this crowd. Well, it wasn't very long. It was advertising in Walgett, in Dubbo. People was there in the TV. $50,000. House, job, everything. They're moving from the city because we want to get the inland people coming. Because we do crowd them in the cars. I like to see people to think about. We want more people coming inland. We don't want this land give to jets or whatever is coming there by acres and acres. Why we're not having it ourselves?
Yes, the state government has made a law allowing a second dwelling to be built on blocks of land, subject to the size of the block. If it is below a certain specification, it has to be attached to the existing dwelling. If the land is bigger than the minimum requirement, it has to be detached from the existing dwelling. But certainly the law does now allow it, and that is law applying to the whole of New South Wales.
Excuse me, did we have a town planning of Leighton Ridge? Town planning of Leighton Ridge, like as usually any town is built is going to compare for the next 20, 30 years. Did we have any town planning of Leighton Ridge, what we can expect? What we, like a lot of people wants to come in here for it. I mean, what we can expect the next 10 or 20, 30 years.
Well, that's
people
what
get.
Lightning Ridge determines.
Yeah, well, I'd like to know what will happen to Lightning Ridge. What we can reach, where we can, people like, all those people, especially they haven't got numbers, they're coming in.
Well, thanks, mate. That's why we must have our own Lightning Ridge Council.
Yeah, I agree with it. Because the only one who can do that is your own council can make the rules.
And people can sit in and listen to the meetings of what's going on.
Nobody else can make it. Nobody else can make it. And that is good. And that's how way we can get the money. We get it from the people.
Hang on. Attention, please. Is there any other argument for a Lightning Ridge Shire?
Can I ask a question?
Sorry, I'm going. Is there any in favour of the amendment?
Can I ask a question, please, Mr. Chairman?
Is there anyone in favour of the amendment?
Can I ask a question?
Go on, please.
I was born here 40 years ago, and whatever this meeting decides, whether they're going to be in favour or against a Lightning Ridge Council, is going to seriously affect me. Now, I'm a minor, but I've also got a property out of town, and very close to town. And my question is this: knowing and having been on the Shire, and knowing most other shires are in the same boat in the country, that 80% of the rates come from the rural ratepayer. Urban dwellers usually pay about 20%, and that's certainly the case in the Walgett Shire Council. Me as a rural ratepayer, being so close to Lightning Ridge, I'd like to know just how big you intend to expand the Shire of Lightning Ridge before I make any commitment. It worries me. If I'm going to be one of 4 or 5 small places around Lightning Ridge going to be putting in 80% of the rates, and I'm certainly not going to be for it. And I'd like to know, we come to this meeting, what sort of proposition have you got? How big is this thing going to be, the Lightning Ridge Council? And I would like the answer to that before I make a decision.
What we propose, Peter, is all the open bearing ridges west to the Graham, Glengarry shipyards, and north Hopefully it'll depend on the Boundaries Commissioner and north of the Queensland border. Opal bearing ridges.
You're going to take a bit out of the Brewarrina Shire then as well.
Hopefully. Make it easier.
Okay, that's the opal mining ridges in the Narran Warrnambool Reserve. What about where grazing properties have, say, 8,000 acres of black soil and, say, 4,000 acres of ridge? Are you going to excise, I don't think you'll excise those ridges from the black soil, and would the ratepayers, would the grazing be expected to pay rates into the Lightning Ridge Shire on the whole property? See, if you were taking the ridge country, you were selecting areas out of grazing properties and out of all existing shires. I think that's, I feel you should be able to do that.
Well, whatever the open bearing ridges, if I take it off, separated from the main structure, that would depend on, I'd say, those graziers whose ridges that are on their property would agree to it. Would that be right, George? I'm looking for legal advice here.
And you haven't done enough footwork yet, little mate.
The open-bearing ridges, all we need is the open-bearing ridges. That is Lightning Ridge. It's as simple as that.
Honestly, yeah, look, I'm not coming in there to disrupt you, but if you try to separate the open-bearing ridges from the black soil,
You're quite
all the
correct.
properties, you're in a mess.
You are quite correct. I understood from what I looked at the Shire map yesterday when I asked this very question of your chairman. He showed me an area delineated on the map which is bounded by the river starting up at Angle, coming straight down the river, cutting across, and of course it does take in those grazing properties as well. So I think in short the answer from what I have seen on the map is the proposal is when they say the open bearing ridges, it is those ridges and the lands attached thereto within that boundary.
Mr. Chairman, I've got 22,500 acres. 1,000 acres of that was ridges, the rest black soil, that's in the Walgett Shire. Now that means that I'd have 21,000 acres in the Walgett Shire. I'd have 270 acres around the town of Angleville, the freehold country in the Brewarrina Shire. And I'd have 1,000 acres in the Lightning Ridge Shire. Oh, we've got nothing around the state, the country spread across 3 shires.
We're lucky.
Well, that certainly is an appropriate argument that if the majority of the meeting agreed to proceed at least to the petition stage, that is certainly an area of a substantial objection to the proposal, which is your right to give to the Minister.
George, can I give you a thought about one thing you said before? Like tourism will attract funds, government grants. Real interesting thing happened to me. I was up on the aerodrome talking to Peter Morris with 3 or 4 Walgett Shire councillors. Peter Morris was Minister for Aviation, Federal Minister for Aviation. He had the man himself up there. You know what he said to us? Because we wanted him to spend a little bit of money on upgrading the aerodrome so that we can fly more people in. Oh, he says, don't you know, we are flat broke. Why don't you put a toilet levy on the motels? Count the number of toilets in the motels and make the motels pay for the upgrading. I quote him correctly. I was in Canberra, member of 3, a committee of 3 here with the Shire President, the Shire Clerk. We grabbed hold of Peter Morris again. Then we met Bob Brown, who's now on the job. They said, don't you know, we're broke, we don't have any money to do any upgrading for tourism at Lightning Ridge. Consider that. Gang, I would really sincerely urge you to do homework and do footwork and look at the financial feasibility. None of us are against anything you're saying. Let's just see what the hell we're up for. Form a committee, look at it, and then present a picture that's logical, where we don't have any disagreements or uncertainties like we have here right now. Do it properly, little mate.
I don't want to continue the way we are.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say to some of the farmers there, there's always been another farmer man, and I believe the farmers is our, give us a living for every one of them. But I would just want one thing I like to say to some that say today, what I can see, they don't like population.
Andrew, please, let the man speak.
What I can see, they don't like the population of this town. But if I have a farm, 1,000 square acres on this, I'd love to have 50,000 people living in the Lake Village. Instead of take my product, sell it overseas, I'll sell it in this town. Right? It's better for the farmers. Population's coming in this town. Bills up. Bills for the area here. It's not productive, and you sell your own product to your own people. Because that's what you sell your product. Where the population is. Now we cannot sell anything here. In the city, in that market. Yeah. But now you one person, you have 1,000 eggs. What's the good if somebody doesn't have
But they get no interest to get us here anyhow. They want, they get a TV, they get
going into bankruptcy, the farmers go into bankruptcy, cannot sell the product. What if it's 10,000 people in this area? They don't have to go to Sydney. You'll sell it in Lake Village, we'll have a butchery, we'll have a manufacturing, we'll have everything that we want.
I could settle down now, I can't tell them for nothing, you can.
I know that, that's what you did. But why do you not have the way the population is, that's what you sell your product.
That'll make a little cheaper.
No, I reckon you make more money that time, even farmers there in some places, they make a fortune from selling his farms in the land.
Excuse me, Mr. Turner, at the risk of selling most newspapers when they come out next week, I really would like to hear from the council what their attitude to the proposition that I put up about people who live on plains, on camps out on plains. I'd like to hear what their attitude is to having that land made available for people to buy.
What do you mean buy? What do you mean buy it? If he said $10,000, would you buy it? No water, no electricity, no anything. Don't you put any money. Don't put your money where is your mouth, but don't put me in trouble. No, stay away from there.
I'd like to hear what their attitude was.
You do not buy because you have the rights. It's a village, we got the rights.
Well, irrespective, I would like to hear what their attitude is to that.
You want us to buy the $1,000 from the Shire or $2,000 for the clan? How much they cost us?
I'm talking about claims.
$250,000 for all those
claims where people are buying. Claims where people are actually living.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Walter Child's attitude is that we've been fighting the Western Lands for a long time now to buy some country so that we can freehold it and do something with it. We're in a state where they don't want to let us freehold it. We're having a lot of difficulties buying it. But we want to work out a system where somebody can live on a claim, get a licence to occupy that claim, which I will admit is not a real good title, but it's a long way better than the one they've got now, and also leave that country underneath that claim available for the genuine miner to work. Now, I said in council the other day, it wasn't carried, but I said in council that if this comes about, council will be a long way better off because they'll be able to collect some rates. And one gentleman over here said they'd be happy to pay some rates. I said at that time, I thought the rates should be about $50 a year. Now, there's a lot of nonsense going on rates here today. Somebody told me they pay $1,700 or $1,800. Someone said $600 or $700. The basic rate in Lightning Ridge is $168. I cough up $4 grand a year for my rural properties. Now, the basic rate's $168 for a person living out of the main business area, living in a house. They might pay $600 or $700 or $1,000, but the balance of it is for services they receive. Don't let's get rates and services mixed up, which a lot of people do.
Yeah, that's it.
Mr. President, we were at the meeting at the Bowling Club several weeks ago, sir. The Commissioner of Western Lands sent a very strong hint that he hoped we succeeded from the Walgett Shire Council because he would sell us the ridges. Now, you just told the meeting that you can't buy the ridges of the Western Lands Commission.
I bet he didn't go back to Sydney and tell the minister he said that.
He pulled that from a public meeting, sir.
Once again, Mr. Chairman, I'm very concerned, like Herman here, about the cost that this is going to cost. To survey a block in Lightning Ridge, to get a surveyor, to survey a block, it costs you around about $1,000. I can see huge costs in getting a surveyor to survey the whole of the Narran Warrnambool system out of the Walgett Shire Council into the Lightning Ridge. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a survey.
If you couldn't follow the ridges, there's something wrong.
it's not that. There's a survey has to be done when you take from one side to another. It will have to be done.
That's up to the Boundaries Commission.
Ask our learned friend, is that Mario?
With due respect, I don't agree with that because that is one thing that would fall squarely within the job of the Boundary Commission.
You think they've been doing that's on the protocol?
They will run off the existing surveys for purposes of the proclamation. The only surveys that come readily to mind that might be necessary are those points of contention between the existing Walgett Shire Council and Lightning Ridge.
And Brewarrina?
Well, if those opal-bearing ridges go into Brewarrina, yes.
Well, they certainly do.
Well, that is then the case. That might be involved there, but certainly not on great parts of the boundary that are not in dispute.
What about the ridges you intend to take out? They've never been surveyed out of the black soil country.
Well, those would certainly be covered by a survey requirement.
Councillor Prentice, do you want to write a reply on your amendment?
No, I have to throw the amendment out, and I hope you go for the motion, really, because if you go for the motion, that means you're not going to do it at any cost. If you're not going to do it at any cost, you're not going to do it at all.
Fair enough. Do you want me to read the motion out again?
It's just
I'm going to vote against my amendment.
read out at any cost.
I'm going to vote against my amendment because I said that you should give the people the choice of doing it at any cost or just doing it. And if you're going to just do it...
Why we never found the figure what will be?
How would I know the figure it will be? I
I
don't
don't know. Did you work already out before we have a meeting?
Yeah, of course it works. Doesn't
Why
it?
didn't it work after meeting?
But why didn't someone write to the council and ask me? Why didn't somebody invite somebody to the council?
You said you paid $4,000 rights for all this land what you explained that you have. I paid $1,200, more than $1,200 just for the water shop down there. And I paid $760 water just from the shop.
Please, order. We put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Prentice's amendment? Raise your right hand, please.
What was it?
Can we read it out again, please, Gary?
You'll have to read it out and explain it up.
While George is talking, I never tried to write it out.
Well, I'm saying, Mr. Timmins, they don't vote for my amendment, they don't want to do it at any cost.
Any cost.
Reality suddenly struck me.
So I'll reread the motion out then.
Unless he's withdrawn.
No, I'm not withdrawing, I'm not going to vote against it. I'm just giving it down
Well, I'll put the amendment again. All those in favour of Councillor Prentice's amendment, raise your right hand.
Can you read it to us?
Can you explain us what's the meaning? Because we don't understand what's the meaning. Tell us what's the meaning.
Well, I'll explain the
Plain
meaning.
English.
I'll explain the meaning. The meaning is, you do it like Anne Bruce said, we want to get out, we do it at any cost. That's the amendment. I'm back again.
Well, we want to first find out the cost, then we make a decision. What about that? We make another meeting if it's necessary.
Order, please, Linda. I'd like to vote on the motion. I think it's straight and simple. We'll be here all night if we just keep on putting amendments to the motion. Do you want me to read the motion out again?
The amendment, Jan, he has explained the amendment.
You now put it to the vote.
Well, I have put it to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Prentice's amendment? No. Are those against? That's lost. Well, now, I put the motion to the people. All those in favour of the motion I've read out?
Can we hear it again, please?
Right, no worries. That this meeting of the people of Lightning Ridge urges the executive of the LRSMF, the Small Miners Federation, to take all necessary action to prepare and present to the state government of New South Wales the appropriate petition for presentation to the Governor of New South Wales seeking the establishment of the Shire of Lightning Ridge, incorporating the areas of all opal-bearing country. All those in favour of that motion?
vote if they don't ban it from the electoral roll.
I'm making 38. I'm sorry.
All those against the motion?
I think there was a point that was just brought up there that would short circuit the whole thing really. I mean, if everybody who's voting, they should be on the electoral roll.
This is the very small number of the people who decide.
Well, you go ahead with this and just be completely shot down in flames.
The whole thing's premature, Captain.
This is the very small number of the people who decide.
We don't know anything, man. You're right.
No, we should all just have plaintiff.
This is a public meeting called by the Small Miners Federation. This is a legal meeting.
I know it's a legal, Mr. Chairman, I know it's a legal meeting. What I'm saying is, Mr. Turner there said before that the people who can vote on this referendum when it comes up are people who are ratepayers of this shire or are on the electoral roll. I'm saying people who vote at this meeting should be some sort of a ratepayer on the electoral roll. Otherwise, to me, it's defeating your purpose. Why not? If in the end we're not allowed to vote.
Out around the outside area.
I've been asked by the chairman would I...
I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. Get everyone on the roll. But I think it's wrong for people to vote in this meeting to say we want it. And then 4 weeks later,
I don't think it's wrong. We all work together. We all help each other.
I've been asked to clarify that point. No, it wouldn't have that problem because the simple fact is this is a public meeting called by the Small Miners Federation to kick a proposal off. What you have in mind is quite valid, but the time that comes in is when the petition circulates around, that people who don't agree with it can say, oh no, look, I'm not having a bar of that. But to be able to do that, they have to be a registered elector. Likewise, those who are putting their name to the petition that maybe the majority of this meeting want, they have to then, when the petition comes in front of them, they have to be a registered elector. If they're not, their signature is null and void.
So we've got plenty of time to get on the roll.
Exactly.
Exactly.
We've got 39 in favour.
All those against the motion?
Gentlemen up the back with hands on heads.
10 against. The motion has been carried. The motion has been carried. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd now like to ask George Turner to talk on some very serious matters concerning our future.
Thank you very much, Gan. I think now that the divisions between us have been sufficiently aired, I intend talking about a couple of subjects, taking this opportunity of being in Lightning Ridge to talk to all of you, my fellow Australians, on things that are occurring that you may not know anything about. The first thing I want to bring to your attention is the problems that are facing Australia through the international treaties that are being entered into by our federal government. You, the Australian people, are not being told the truth as to what is really happening to your country. Have any of you, for instance, asked yourselves a question when you pull up that petrol pump there at Shell Garage? Why is it that now in mid-October we are paying far more for petrol than what we were back in even June or July? Well, don't take my word for it. I'll quote to you from the Sydney Morning Herald, page 1, Thursday the 27th of September 1990. War treaty pledges our oil to Japan.
and I will read to you the first couple of paragraphs. Australia could be forced to supply oil to Japan and other countries in the event of a war in the Middle East under a little-known international treaty signed in 1979. The treaty could force Australia to contribute to an international emergency supply of oil supplies to provide oil importing countries such as Japan, West Germany and Italy with oil for the duration of any war in the Gulf. The article then goes on to describe how we are over 90% self-sufficient in oil and that we are locked in under this international treaty even to the events that are currently happening now. That, my friend, is one of the true reasons of what is happening out there. 1979 was the year the treaty was entered into. What federal government was in power then? Coalition. Now, I am not here to beat the coalition, nor am I here to beat the Hawke government. By heaven, I wish they were all in here, I'd take them all on. But there is the first thing you need to know about. It is not my word. You have the authority of the Sydney Morning Herald, and after all, they have a reputation of being an honourable newspaper. The second one you need to know about is evidenced by what happened in Western Australia. This is another international treaty whereby Australia's sovereignty has gone right down the gurgle, and you are not being told. This article appeared Tuesday, May 29, page 3 of this year in The Australian. The heading, Minister to face court over racism. Now this article, and I won't bother reading from it, I'll just describe it because time has become a little bit important. The Minister for Tourism in Western Australia was required to attend before the full bench of the Supreme Court of Western Australia to justify her decision, and by the way, we are talking now on Labor government. The Minister for Tourism in Western Australia required before the Supreme Court of WA to justify her decision refusing the 21-year long-term lease of Rottnest Island development, tourist development, to a Japanese company. She justified her decision on the grounds that it was not right for the people of WA to have their own territory under the control of a foreign power, etc., and foreign company, that it was best in the interests of people of WA that it remain in Western Australia. Now, notwithstanding that public stance, she was hauled before the Supreme Court, and on my understanding, that case is still going. What was the reason that she was hauled before the Supreme Court? Because they alleged that she had breached the 1985 racial discrimination.
Can I say something in return to what you've just said? And it just actually brings back a point. In 1976, I was issued an Australian passport and a visa to travel overseas.